This week's episode is brought to you by a slew of new patrons. We have Victoria, Huey, Mike, Steve, Nate, Mo, Lawrence, Barry, and Paul. Thank you all so much for making these episodes possible. $80,000 was last week's budget, and we found our first appearance of boats like the Hans Christian. We looked at a West Sail 42, which there are lots of in this price range. We saw a Beneteau 440, and we finished off with a Hunter 410. And while those were great, I'm really excited to hit the $100,000 mark and see what's there. But to get to $100,000, we first have to look at 90. And now we're into the big bucks, so we do have some sort of high expectations for these boats. We aren't expecting a full-on 4-bedroom catamaran here or anything with a twin helm or something like that. I am hoping we do start to see like some Sun Odysseys and some more of those rock-solid ocean cruisers we all love. So let's see what we find.
This week on Everything You Need to Know. Dad, how much is $90,000?
It used to be enough for a small house.
This week on Everything You Need to Know, the $90,000 sailboat.
Hey guys, sorry I'm a day late with this week's episode. A lot has happened. I met a patron in Windsor named Mo, and I almost jumped on his boat for a trip up the Welland Canal. It's a Catalina 47, a really nice boat. Then I drove across a little bridge over to a place called Michigan to hang out with a different patron for the day. We looked at a Hunter 26, the water ballast version, and that's sort of going to be his first keel boat. He's had a Hobie Cat for a while, and this boat was in great shape. It was near perfect. And while I tore it apart, trying to find anything wrong with it to lower the $13,000 asking price, I just couldn't find anything that wasn't minor and cosmetic. So a big congratulations to Robert on his new boat. Sail her hard and fast and make as many safe miles as you can, sir. And thanks for having me over to help out. Also of note, we nailed a first place in our Thursday night race series aboard a Pearson 30. It was blowing just over 20 knots, and we beat up the first leg, struggling to hit 5.5 or 6 knots on the upwind. But as soon as we rounded the mark, we cleared 8 knots, which is a speed a 30-foot Pearson really has not a lot of business actually going. We beat out the Hughes 35 that's currently holding first place, and we beat out the Olsen 30 that I crewed on last year. So what a day. Anyway, I'm back behind the camera now, and I'm actually planning to take Lady K across to Michigan at the beginning of September for a big raft off, which is near Metro Beach as far as I understand. So stay tuned for that. $90,000 is an interesting number because it seems to be all the boats where the owner or the broker was sort of like, is this a $100,000 boat? Perhaps not. I think I'm going to list it at 90 and see what happens. The one huge thing that you'll notice at $90,000 is that you can have just about any boat that you want as long as it's a 50-footer. And I'm serious, like here's a Hunter 54. Or perhaps you want a steel boat, in which case here's a custom John Hutton 51. Or this, a very nice Spencer 51. Or a Bavaria 50. Or an Alden Dolphin 47. These are kind of rare. Here's a Mariner 47. Here's a Feeling 486. The list goes on and on. So I think $90,000 is sort of the hallmark of a 50-footer. So bear with me and let's go down that road for a minute. And spoiler, most of us don't need or want a 50-footer, but why not look? This is a lot like car shopping when you set out to buy a reasonable SUV for the family with a specific budget in mind for a brand new model, and then realizing when you start looking that what you're going to pay for the brand new SUV could actually buy you like a 3-year-old Denali or some super fancy SUV. Now your responsible adult brain goes, we don't need a big fancy high dollar ride like that. We should just buy a Santa Fe, which is what we came here for. But the little kid inside you always says, but we can have a Denali. It's irresponsible and something a little kid would think. And that's the way I see these 50-footers. I really, really love the idea, but I shouldn't buy one. What I need is something small enough that I can easily single-hand it. And the stays at marinas and things like that will be too expensive with a 50-footer, and the cost of ownership over the years. So perhaps like a 42 or so foot limit would be a better idea. But I see things like this Bavaria 50, and I think, wow, there would be so much space on a 50-footer. And she's a twin helm. The cockpit is absolutely massive. She's got multiple bedrooms and multiple heads and hallways that lead all over the place inside. I've never had a boat with hallways. I could actually take crew aboard anytime I wanted and sail her anywhere in absolute comfort and livability. But then my grown-up responsible voice steps in. Tim, this is an old boat. It has tens of thousands of miles on it. It will need so many repairs and so many things will be breaking. It'll also cost so much to dock it, and there's so much to go wrong. And don't even think about hauling it out. It's way too big for most facilities. But yes, I would love to have a 50-footer and maybe run a YouTube channel with different crew coming aboard every few months and become sort of like the next Delos like they used to be. And honestly, that's the only way I can make a 50-footer make sense, is that exact tiny little scenario, but no others. So my adult brain wins over eventually, and I accept the fact that I should rightfully, like most of you, buy a smaller boat that's maybe a bit newer if $90,000 is my price point. But it was nice to dream. So moving on. At 90 grand, we actually see the first appearance of Jeanneau, which is super cool. I have a soft spot in my heart for these boats. Jeanneau started making boats in France in 1957, founded by Henry Jeanneau, as you'd expect. He owned a hardware store at the time, and he decided to make boats. And he actually started making power boats a lot. They still make a lot of power boats. Eventually, Jeanneau started making sailboats, and they wanted to break into the super fancy high-dollar catamaran market. But they didn't want to call them Jeanneau catamarans, so they created a little spin-off brand, a little spin-off title to make the cats under, and they called it Lagoon. You may have heard of them. Jeanneau and subsequently Lagoon were acquired by the Beneteau Group, and they sort of sit under that umbrella now. So if you see a Jeanneau and a Beneteau sailboats, they really do have a lot in common, aside from being made in the same country, France. And Jeanneaus are usually $200,000 boats, so at 90 grand, we probably shouldn't expect much. But here's a 1984 45-footer, so at least the size is more in the right bracket for us. It's a bit smaller than 50, albeit it is still slightly big. This is a Sunkiss 45, and at 25,000 pounds, it's one heck of a Caribbean cruiser, and it has the tankage to probably meet your needs. 50 gallons of diesel, 140 gallons of fresh water. She's got a very large cockpit to give you room to enjoy sailing or your time at anchor, and all the port lights you'd expect from a more production-style boat like Jeanneau makes. Inside you get a hugely wide cabin with tons of room, but being an 80s boat, it's much more traditional wood instead of that IKEA finish that the newer models got. This model actually gives you a staircase that's like double wide. It's for two people, I don't know what the deal is. And it uses a split aft cabin where both sides are big enough for two couples to live comfortably. This is the owner's version model, so it's not like a charter boat with 4 cabins. Instead, up in the front, you get a Pullman berth to port, and you get a V berth that's one massive head with a huge amount of space in it for the shower. And a lot of people really love this Pullman design. All in all, this is a very nice boat for 90 grand, and it's surely capable of Caribbean cruising. It already comes with a life raft and a water maker, and it's actually sitting in Panama right now, awaiting its next adventure. But it is a lot older, so we're going to move on. Lady K Sailing is brought to you by patrons, people who give a couple of bucks an episode to really make this whole channel possible. I couldn't do it without you guys, so thank you to all the existing patrons for bringing us this far and keeping us moving. If you want to help out to keep the channel going, please consider becoming a patron. Next up, coming to you from the West Coast, we have the Mighty Morgan. Now, we've been seeing a lot of Morgans, and they are renowned for being big, heavy-built cruisers that are well-designed, and this one is right up my alley because it's the 2-stateroom layout. Now, she's from the mid-80s, but this example looks to be in great shape with more modern features that make her easier to live with on the long term. You get non-skid across just about the whole deck with a more modern-looking port lights, making it look more like a mid-90s boat instead of a mid-80s boat. And this one looks very well kept and cared for, and the owner even went so far as to make sunbrella coverings for the teak in the cockpit on the coamings and all the winches and the pedestal. So someone got a sewing machine for Christmas. But you do get a little bit of a sugar scoop to make it easier to get in and out when you're bringing the dinghy up with groceries in it. But oddly, no davits. For 90 grand, no davits? And Morgan gives you this weird sort of a stoop outside the companionway entrance, which I'm not really sure how I feel about. It looks more like sort of a pain to live with than anything I'd want to deal with every day. I'm also not thrilled about the very, very dated electronics for a $90,000 boat. But let's have a look inside. Here we get some very nice woodwork with a comfortable looking nav desk where you might be able to get some work done, but a very steep climb to come down the stairs. You get a comfortable and roomy saloon with more sunbrella coverings like over the keel stepped mast, which is nice. The mast is always cold, and this actually helps to deaden some of the sounds that reverb through the mast from that halyard you forgot to secure. But again, with the very dated electronics, is this like original equipment? I have to love the upholstery in here though. It's top shelf all the way and it looks very, very comfortable. And this is the 2-stateroom version, so we'll have lots of space for 2 couples to live comfortably. Now, I love a big, heavy, ocean-going Morgan as much as the next person, and this boat is definitely a great example. But on the other hand, while she looks to have very good bones, she needs a lot of updating for sure. The engine looks very tired, and everything sort of looks original. I suppose she is a rock-solid blank slate for anyone who wants to go world cruising and outfit an already amazing hull with all the stuff the way they want it. This Morgan was intended to be a very comfortable but also very fast cruiser. For 45 feet, she's just over 20,000 pounds, which is actually really light for her size. And she's not a full-on long keel. She's a fin, and a very high aspect one at that. I like the speed of this hull, but the near 7-foot draft means, sort of skipping across the Bahamas, almost impossible. So let's move on. Last week at 80 grand, we saw our first big boat, Hunter. We looked at a 410. And while you're going to get a late 90s boat in this price point, adding 10 grand does something pretty cool. It gets us from the Hunter 410 to the Hunter 430, which, as the naming convention suggests, is 2 feet longer. And honestly, guys, this is one of the coolest boats I think I've ever looked at. I mean, outside she looks like any other Hunter 40-something. You get that white plastic that's sort of a little too white. We get tons of black plexi on the deck to let the light in. We get gray non-skid sort of everywhere it should be. Stainless anchor rollers in a B&R rig. All that standard Hunter MO so far. But where the 430 starts to blow my mind is in its livability. You need some comfort while you sail along and enough space to entertain like 26 of your closest friends, right? The 430 has you covered with this nearing ridiculous amount of space in the cockpit just off of its huge walk-through onto the sugar scoop. And the arch. Look at the arch with a full-on dashboard of electronics in the top section. It's a very cool way to keep all the screens from cluttering up the pedestal. It's just a shame the arch looks like really cheaply made. And I'm sorry, but I'm not really sorry. They did such a good job with this boat, and then they bolt on this arch that seems to be made of Legos. Maybe this umbrella guy from the last boat can make us a cover for it. Now, we talked before about being a live-aboard cruiser. You actually spend about 95% of your time just living and working on the boat, and about 5% of the time sailing from Paradise Island to Paradise Island. So if you are a live-aboard cruiser, this is where the Hunter 430 really starts to get amazing. Look at this cabin. Hunter couldn't be bothered with any traditional shapes here. This sort of trapezoidal shape is everywhere, and it's such a unique flair, and everything looks super cool. What a comfortable place to live inside this boat. She even has a comfortable nav station I'd really enjoy doing all my work at. We also get the Pullman-style forward cabin with its own little desk and a huge head instead of a V-berth. And we've been seeing a lot of boats like that with the Pullman and the massive head and the V-berth as we approach 100 grand. And look at how huge it is. What a cool design. Out back, we get another cabin with yet another unique shape to it, and what looks like a very large, comfy bed, and room to actually stand up and get dressed in the morning. This is very big boat space, but remember, this Hunter's only 43 feet long. I see another single seat to hang out in, and all the custom cockpit cushions that look to be in reasonably good shape are in here. There's lots of storage and tons of space. This boat really is blowing my mind. Even the diesel looks clean and well kept. One thing we should note here is that with any boat purchase like this, you need to get a survey to make sure nothing's wrong that you can't handle. And a survey also helps you negotiate the price down if there are problems. And as one viewer asked me to mention, you need to make sure you can insure whatever you're going to buy. Based on the year of the boat, some insurance companies just won't touch you if it's too old or the value of the boat is perceived to be too low. So you really have to line up insurance before you actually hand over any cash. Okay, I realize this video is getting a bit long, but there's one more boat I want to talk about at the $90,000 mark. And if that Hunter just doesn't do it for you because you want to cross oceans or you need something a bit heavier, how about a 33,000 pound center cockpit Ketch? This boat is a favorite of mine. This is an Endeavour 43. You won't find your arch made out of Legos or a sugar scoop on this girl, but what you will find is glass laid up thicker than a milkshake with a protected place to pilot from in the center cockpit. You get a proper Ketch rig to balance the boat out on those long passages and make sure you sail straight with very little need for an autopilot if you get the trim right. You also get davits and a couple, albeit trickle charging, solar panels. You even get a big Rockna already fitted because cruising boat, and that's actually the same one I have on Lady K, and she's almost 10 feet shorter. You get a fairly roomy cabin with that old world teak everywhere, and if that's your thing, it's beautiful. You even get room for a chair. This boat even has a big fridge in its tight little galley, but don't be fooled by the size of the galley. Smaller is much easier to use, especially the galley style with the hallway down the middle when you're at sea or you're bashing to weather. And you get hallways leading to the staterooms and storage literally everywhere. You even get a bathtub. Now, I do question the need for a bathtub because they use a lot of fresh water to use them, so I imagine it's probably more storage than anything. The electronics in this boat actually look reasonable, and I would say this boat has seen some miles in her day, but she looks like she's almost ready to head out to sea again. Endeavour yachts are known to be big, heavy-built cruisers that will take care of you in a blow, and they run just about forever. And while the center cockpit versions like this one may not be the prettiest girls in the anchorage, what you're getting for your money with a boat like this isn't supposed to win any beauty pageants. Endeavour gives you a boat aimed solely at getting you anywhere in the world you'd like to go in comfort and safety, and that is kinda hard to find these days, especially for less than $100,000. That's it for this week, guys. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, hit the subscribe button. I will see you guys next time. Until then, keep the heavy side down, but not all the way down.